Greetings, my human friends. This is Rudolf, the tall white alien. Today I have a little history lesson for you, which might connect the dots for one or the other of you. And it will give you also an insight and a wrap up of my teachings. When the tall white aliens first made contact with the species on planet Earth, they found an intelligent race other than the human race. It was before the Homo sapiens, even long before the Homo erectus, as you call these species, was roaming on planet Earth. I call them, and it's only a name I give them, because they had no verbal expressions, speech and names. I call them, because of their appearance, aurelians. Simply because later they had an aura, a bluish aura, when they lived underground. But before that, they lived like humans today on the surface of planet Earth. The Aurelians were a race of people which were not connected with the DNA of the modern human. It was a non-human people, a non-human species which were living many millions of years before the first Homo erectus, which lived about 2 million years ago, was even created. I spoke extensively in the past about the pole shift, and naturally it is, for even you humans, a scientific fact that many pole shifts have taken place. One pole shift took place when the Aurelians lived on the surface of Earth. And it was a very severe pole shift with very strong sun winds, which had a devastating effect on the Aurelian population. A non-human, as I said, highly intelligent species. Most of them got wiped out, burned alive, so to speak, and the rest took shelter underground. And there it becomes interesting. The Aurelians have been living parallel to the human species for many, many thousands of years. Humans then, after the pole shift, and I will speak later about how they came to pass, humans lived on the surface of Earth, and the Aurelians lived underground, simply because of their DNA, they were not able to take sunlight, which killed most of them in the event of the pole shift, which happened earlier. The Aurelians, which were left and took shelter in caves and in mountains, were desperate to look for some solution during and after the pole shift. And there we came in, the tall white aliens. We looked for an intelligent race in the universe which could feed us the emotional energy we needed. And after taking in all the emotional energy of the pole shift and the Aurelian race, which suffered under it, we contacted them and offered our help. The Aurelians needed a new home, and it could not be on the surface of Earth. So we taught them the art of building underground structures. The Aurelians became the most skilled of all creatures when it comes to earth moving in the whole universe. They built over the thousands and thousands of years on planet Earth tunnel systems which are several stories deep and extend for thousands and thousands of miles. Many of these tunnels, most of them actually, are still in existence. It is known to men that, even explorers, that these tunnels exist, and people over the centuries have tried to make their way in to find out what this system is all about. Humans came up with all kinds of explanations who built these tunnels and what they were built for. Many different theories, none of them held. Plus, humans can only go so far inside. Even with modern technology, some of these tunnels, which then again become big rooms and enormous plazas as big as cathedrals and huge spaces, but then again they become very, very narrow and hard to penetrate. That is one reason why human explorers and specialists only could go so far. Plus, many of these tunnels then were underwater. Others were found to have enormously dangerous gases. And of course, as we all know, after a few miles only, latest, there are walls and there is debris which is covering the entrances, covering the tunnels for miles and miles. It is simply impossible for humans to penetrate the enormous tunnel system which exists under most parts of planet Earth. This tunnel system, these underground buildings, so to speak, were the home of the Aurelians. There they lived, sheltering themselves from the sunlight, and created their own culture, which was without a language, which was without names and writings. The Aurelians, as they did when they lived before the pole shift on the surface of Earth, only communicated by telepathy. And that's also the reason we, the tall white aliens, could stay in contact with them. Telepathically, just like I speak right now out of the body of Karl, who also is a telepathic person. These Aurelians, when we taught them how to build a tunnel system and gave them other technologies, particularly helped them with their DNA enhancement program. And here we come to the point which I'm speaking of for many years. The Aurelians lived underground, built a civilization underground, but never forgot their heritage. They came from the surface, and they wanted to return to the surface, which is natural. So they asked us to help them to create some kind of DNA, some kind of possibility to create a hybrid who could actually go back onto the surface of Earth and live under the sun. We did experiment with the Aurelians for a long time. One of the first races which were created and then put onto a small continent was the race of the Atlanteans. The race of the Atlanteans was a race of Aurelians who were able to go and bear the bright sunlight. But they had another problem. They could not bear the air. By now, the Aurelians have adapted to some mix of gases underground which they could breathe and live with. But then, when we created, in conjunction with them, a race which could take summer sunlight, we did not put into consideration the fact that the air, as we know it on planet Earth right now, could not be breathed by these people. So there was on Atlantis built a dome basically of gases, of heavy gases, and this bubble was basically the breathing air for the Atlantean people on Atlantis. But then came the time when this gas bubble basically bursted and the Atlanteans were wiped out, except a small group of them who still could adapt to the air fled to the other continents. And there we found the white race, for example, the northern whites. The Atlanteans were white, very pale white, whiter than me. As you see Karl, he is basically a northern European, but he is by far not as pale as the Atlanteans were. The reason is their mother race, their original race, were the Aurelians, and they lived for thousands of years underground. And because they did, they became so extremely white, albino-like white, and that's the reason when the Atlanteans, the very few who could escape and over generations adapted to air, they lived in the northern parts of Europe. Well, this is only one part of it. Then later on, the Aurelians created several other forms of humans, starting with Africa. They had the Homo erectus about 2 million years ago, and they became also extinct over time until the Homo sapiens were introduced. These were then the people you see today on planet Earth, and the different skin colors is another point. The Aurelians experimented with various skin colors in order to see which one would adapt best to the sunlight. So they came up with shades of brown, black, yellow, reddish, not white. The white race itself is a direct descendant from the Atlanteans, and they were not meant to be part of the different other races, and later on, by mixing basically the northern Europeans and the rest of the creations of the Aurelians, they became adapted to each other and mixed completely in. Yes, so that is the story as it never has been told before, because for human science, the not human, but the people's story as such started with the human being. Any other living form before was primitive, and plant life, animal life, then came the Homo erectus and so on, the primates, the Homo erectus, Homo sapiens, and as you all know. I try to explain to you that before the human being was roaming the world, there has been a highly developed Aurelian race, which made many technical wonders on this planet. For example, they became such good builders and earth movers that we gave them the contract to build the pyramids, the storage facilities, as we call them, for human emotions. I spoke of many years ago. Lots of you will remember. The Aurelians built these structures for us. And many other ones which are below Earth, as we just spoke of before. Yes, so this whole picture comes together, and there are many more things to talk about when it comes to this beautiful race. For example, the Aurelians, because there is no light in the tunnels and in their underground cities and countries, other than their own aura, which is a light bluish aura, and there have been so many of them that this created a dim light, a dim, healthy light for them they could easily and comfortably live under. That's also the reason we call them Aurelians, because of the aura, which is mainly blue. Explorers who went into the tunnel systems over the centuries spoke about the eerie blue light. An eerie blue light, yes, that's the light of the people, which were, of course, masters of deception, masters of hiding. The explorers, the human explorers, saw light, dim lights, but did not see the Aurelians, the people themselves. Also, when the explorers went into the tunnel systems, Of course, the Aurelians felt threatened. They were the most peaceful of all creatures. Never fought a war, never attacked a human, but when the humans, in their curiosity, came and penetrated their tunnel systems, for example, they had to defend themselves. Humans used rope, long rope, to make sure that they don't get lost in the labyrinth of tunnels, which many of them did and never came back out. So they used the rope so they could then, after they went for miles in, find their way out. Of course, the Aurelians, not stupid, they cut these ropes. They turned off their lights. They did all kinds of little tricks to make these people get lost in the tunnel system. And after a while, human explorers of the ancient times, they got afraid and left these tunnel systems alone until newer times, when it became unbearable for the Aurelians to be basically attacked constantly by explorers. So they flooded and they crashed the tunnels, and there's a lot of debris. They blocked basically the entrances. Today, there are many thousands of underground facilities which can still be seen. You can see the entrances. You can even go into the tunnel system today. Near where I live, there is one. And yes, you can basically explore it to a point. A few hundred yards, a few hundred meters, and get an idea where the Aurelians lived. But then, in every single case, in every country and continent, you will be stopped by a wall and debris, and even explorers cannot go further. Besides water and gases, as I spoke of before. Yes, my friends, this was a relatively long video, and I hope you enjoyed it. And did I forget something to mention? Yes, since the pole shift and the devastating effect on the Aurelians, they are having a symbol which is called the black sun, which is the opposite of the bright light sun which killed them. So the black sun, the darkness, they worship because it gave them life. The opposite of the human being today who live of sunlight. We without the sun we couldn't exist, and the same happened in the opposite to the Aurelians. So they worship the black sun. Well, worship is overdone. They use it as a symbol, as we, the tall white aliens, use this symbol of which you all know by now. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this explanation. Until next time, Rudolf, the tall white alien.